his appearance is required, Gretchen, he will be appearing before whatever forum, whether it will be before the DOJ or the Ombudsman.
At least nawala na yung haka-haka na namatay na siya at siya ay tumakbo na sa ibang bansa. So maganda yan at yung mga nangyari noon na hindi siya lumalantad ay siguro yun ang previous indication na guilty siya. Pero ngayon sinabi na rin ng kanyang abogado na handa na silang harapin yung kaso laban kay General Mr. Zulueta.
I asked Colonel Zulueta to give to me his comments point by point for every allegation. Present, we do not know yet where to submit the counter affidavit because there is no resolution yet of the motion for inhibition filed by the Camp General Bantay.
Proof of life. The lawyer of Ricardo Zulueta shows photographs of his client over the weekend. He says the former Bureau of Corrections security official is not in hiding and is ready to face charges for the murder of broadcaster Percy Lapid. What is Zulueta's version of everything so far? We find out in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to The Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. Kasama po natin dito sa studio, Ed Lingao of One News. Online, kasama natin si Ami Pamintuan, Editor-in-Chief ng Philippine Star, and Lucy Cruz Valdez, Head of News 5. Chiefs, happy Monday.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday.
Apat na araw na lang. Pasko na.
Oo.
Ano ka alam sabihin ko?
Apat? Hindi pa, di ba?
Pero,
Well,
Pispiras na.
gabi na ng Lunes eh. Gabi na ng Lunes eh.
Pero in the meantime, nung Friday and the weekend, ang dami nangyari, Ami. Ano bang mga balitang mga sinusubukan nating sabayan ngayon?
Pero Monday naman muna, backpage muna tayo ulit umpisa. Nanalo na si Argentina, no?
Grabe.
Ini-impress sa World Cup.
Saka si Messi.
At ngayon, inaabangan pa natin ng mga final minutes ng UAAP Ateneo versus U.
Ayoko malaman.
Ateneo lead. Of course, inaabangan pa natin.
Alam niyo, taon-taon naman naglalaban yan eh.
Wag ka masyadong baka dekada na naman tayo.
Oo nga Pero kung gusto niyo bad news, bukas naman after several rollbacks, tataas na naman.
Oo nga, price hike na naman.
Babawiin yung binaba ng diesel last week. Halos 3 piso.
Medyo malaki na.
Pero sa kabila naman yan, in-extend ng gobyerno ang lower tariffs on pork products, on a number of commodities. So ngayon, ang mga magsasaka, mga growers are all anxious and some are threatening pork holiday na naman.
Oo nga, mga agricultural products kulang kasi daw, sabi nila kulang daw.
Pinipigilan niya pang-stabilize daw.
Pero pang-stabilize, but the prices have not gone down since EO17 was implemented in May of this year. I mean, the prices of rice have stayed...
Yun nga ang point nila
Pero kasi...
Parang wala rin namang epekto. Kung di lalo pang baka... Wala, hindi nila mataasan. Sila, siyempre, yung cost of operations nila tumaas na ng tumaas, di ba? Parang gano'n.
Tapos the revenue losses are mounting. Ang estima ng SINAG, you're looking at 9 billion pesos in duties that were forgone or are forgone per year for pork alone.
In the meantime, isa pa, of course, malaking balita nung Friday, pumanaw ang founder ng CPP, si Jose Maria Sison, and mamaya pag-uusapan din natin yan. But we will be bringing in our first guest after a quick break. The Chiefs will be right back. until this weekend, authorities did not know if he is already dead or if he's still alive, and they were at the very least clueless about his whereabouts. But former BuCor Senior Superintendent Ricardo Zulueta is alive and is now denying any involvement in the killing of broadcaster Percy Lapid. We bring in Atty. Lauro Gacayan, lawyer to Mr. Zulueta. Welcome to the Chiefs, Atty. Gacayan.
Thank you.
Good evening, sir.
Magandang gabi po.
Opo, attorney, catch up muna tayo. Nasaan po ngayon si Ginoong Zulueta? And nasaan po ba siya all of these past months?
No, he said he visited his relatives in Manila, in Baguio, La Union, in Pangasinan. While ago, I talked to him this morning. He was in Western Pangasinan visiting a member of his family.
But he was aware po na hinahanap siya ng gobyerno, particularly in connection with the death and the murder of Percy Lapid. Or are you saying that he was never even in hiding?
No, he was not in hiding, Roby. That's why I was wondering about that term, hinahanap siya, for example, by the PNP. Why? Because there was no case filed against him. He has not received a copy of the complaint against him. There is no warrant for his arrest. How can we say that he's in hiding or the PNP is looking for him? There was even no completion of the preliminary investigation, no resolution yet of the Department of Justice finding probable cause against him. So there is no reason for him to be in hiding.
Pero attorney, official siya ng Bureau of Corrections At hinahanap siya doon sa Bureau nung nagpumalit kay Gerald Bantag na OIC at hinahanap din siya ng Department of Justice. So, ang sinasabi ng mga tao, flight daw is an indication of guilt. So, kaya yun ang sinasabi ng mga tao na nasan kaya si Mr. Zulueta?
Maybe you are not informed, Amy, that effective on the very first day of General Katapang in BuCor, during the flag ceremony, he already announced that he has terminated the services of Colonel Zulueta. That's why after the flag ceremony, Colonel Zulueta went to his office and he was shocked that there is already another official in his office. There was already a takeover. There is no formal turnover of that position from Colonel Zulueta to the person who replaced him. So according to him, there is no more reason to stay there. He has no longer any office to stay. He has no more position to discharge. So he left and returned to his place in Baguio City, visiting his relatives in other provinces.
Sir, you mean as far as Colonel... Yes, sir. Sir, you mean as far as Colonel Zulueta is concerned, he is no longer a government official or an employee of the government?
That's his understanding, Ed. Because according to him, during that very first day of General Katapang, during that flag ceremony, he already announced that his work, he's already terminated as the Directorate for Security and Operations of BuCor. And when he tried to enter his office, there is already another official taking over his functions. So according to him, there is no need to report to BuCor because there is no turnover. I was not even mentioned or what to do later on if he is no longer discharging the office assigned to him before as Directorate for Security and Operations. So what will be his next job if he was already replaced without any formal turnover?
Well, yeah, he may have been demoted, but doesn't he continue to be an employee of the government? I mean, he continues to be employed by the government. So, in effect, diba, na-demote siya, sabihin na lang natin, he was taken out of office, but he continues to be an official of the government. So, is he on AWOL? I think that's what's going around, no? But he has been on absence without leave, effectively.
the problem, Loche, is he was not informed about it. What should be his next position, assuming he was demoted? Where shall he hold office? None. Why? Because there was no mention whatsoever of who will be his replacement. Why is it that another person is sitting in his office? So what should be his work now? Where shall he hold office? No mention whatsoever.
Well,
There
sorry,
was no communication
yes, sir.
from the DOJ on what should be his next position.
Kasi, sir,
Or
with the
where
other-
shall he hold office?
Yes, sir. Kasi, sir, with the other uniformed services, for example, if a policeman, for example, is taken out of his specific position, he still retains his rank, he still retains his employment until the paperwork is done, whatever the paperwork says, whether he's demoted or whether he's suspended, and so on down the line. In other words, the position itself is not necessarily connected or directly related to the post that he was holding at that particular time. Kumbaga, for example, a deputy director of the PNP may be taken out of his position, but he still retains his rank until there is administrative movement.
Floating lang siya.
Example, yes, he will be informed of where to report, for example. So, the regional director of PNP Cordillera, for example, he was relieved and he will be required to return in Camp Crame. There is an order insofar as that transfer is concerned. But in the case of Colonel Zulueta, there was no communication whatsoever about that. What will be his next position? None. But he was very, very sure that there was that announcement during the flag ceremony that he was already terminated. That's why another person was already staying at his office. So according to him, I do not want to insist. If I was already terminated, then I will not insist.
Okay, now moving on, whatever his actual status is, let's talk about the case of Percy Lapid. Ano po ang, according to Mr. Zulueta, ang alam niya sa nangyari kay Percy Lapid? And maybe you could also take us to the relationship of Mr. Zulueta with General Bantag.
Now, of course, insofar as the case of Percy Lapid, I have read already the original extrajudicial confession of Scorian. I also was able to read the subsequent extrajudicial confession of Scorian 4 days after the death of June Villamor. There is no mention whatsoever of the name of Colonel Zulueta. In fact, in the second extrajudicial confession or the supplemental extrajudicial confession, there is only one name mentioned in addition to the first extrajudicial confession, and that is Bantag. There was no mention of the first name of that person. Insofar as Colonel Zulueta, there was no mention whatsoever.
Nabanggit po yata siya dun sa pagkamatay ni Mr. Cristito Villamor. Yan ang sinasabi ng mga tatlong gang leader sa NBP na si Zulueta daw yung nagkausap sa kanila. Yun, doon siya nabanggit. Have you also read that
Yes, Ami. And Colonel Zulueta completely denied any participation in this one.
Siya yung siya ang makakapag-link actually kay Mr. Bantag doon sa yung mga dikit-dikit na yan na incidences. Ano rin po yung masasabi niya?
Now, please take note, Ami, that insofar as the New Bilibid prisons, the assignment of Colonel Zulueta was the minimum security section. And he was not, there is another official, Colonel Mangos, who was in charge in the maximum security section where these high-profile inmates were. So, from that, you can see that Colonel Zulueta was not there at the place of these high inmates where they were serving sentence in that cell or that dormitory where they are staying.
But according to the lawyer of the Mabasa family, no, he was the deputy security head. So, in other words, ang sabi niya, as deputy head of security, he would have had access to all areas of the Bilibid. So, ano hong komento niyo dyan?
Yeah.
It does make sense
Yeah,
as
yes.
head of deputy head,
Yes,
right?
but he's denying that he ever went to that place, Aluchi, and demand these inmates to talk to him and give them instructions, illegal instructions. He completely denied that.
Okay, in an interview with ABS-CBN, si Zulueta pointed to the drug lords as the ones framing him. Are you aware of this?
Yeah.
And if so, what would the motives be of the drug lords in having Percy Lapid killed? Or for that matter, Jun Villamor, no? So, ano ho kaya ang...
That was not what he was saying, Rochi. What he was saying is these statements linking them was part of the drug lords' attempt to get back at them. That's why they are being
For what?
investigated. Take note that from the time that General Bantag and Colonel Zulueta took over New Bilibid prisons, they have limited the undeserved luxury given to these drug lords. Take note, before that, they caused, for example, the demolition of a building used to house these VIPs. They were living in a life of luxury. All of these were removed by General Bantag and Colonel Zulueta. Because of that, these inmates, high-profile inmates, have axe to grind against General Bantag and Colonel Zulueta.
Yes, sir.
Attorney,
Sir,
tinawin ko lang, hindi bang member pa ba ng BJMP si Mr. Zulueta? Yun yung kanyang mother unit actually, di ba? Sila ni Gerald Bantag. Are they still part of the BJMP?
Yes, Ami. Of course, that was the original assignment before they were transferred to New Bilibid prison.
So hindi ba dapat tinanong muna niya o sinubukan niyang tanongin yung BJMP? Paano ba ako ilalagay dito dahil pinairat ako dun sa BuCor? Did he ever try to reach the BJMP? Para tanungin kung floating ba ako o
discuss
no?
that matter to him. Ami, I'm sorry.
well, sir, we do...
But what he told is that since I was already terminated, I do not want to force myself and continue working if they no longer want me to serve the government.
Yes, sir. Sir, we do appreciate what you're saying na itong testimonies nila because they have an axe to grind against Bantag and Zulueta because of what they did dun sa VIPs. But at the same time, a while ago, you're just telling us na walang kinalaman si Zulueta with any of these people. In fact, siya nasa minimum security lamang. So which is which?
Yes, he was at the minimum security prison. However, since they are saying that he is close to General Bantag, they are trying to connect Colonel Zulueta, making him as the link in order to get back at General Bantag.
Yes, sir. But although you did say a while ago nga na si Zulueta and Bantag were instrumental in demolishing the kubols ng mga VIPs, and that's why they're trying to get back to him. Ilan po, I'm trying to reconcile lang po kung ano talaga yung papel ni Zulueta doon sa BuCor. I also understand he was head of the Directorate for Security and Operations, which is it's a senior position. It's not just any position there. It's a senior position in BuCor.
Yes, that's correct, Ed.
So if
That's why he's coordinating with other officials of BuCor. Take note, there are different officials assigned sa minimum security portion or section, maximum security section. There are other offices therein.
kanina po may prinisinta si Mr. Katapang, si Director Katapang na mga prisoners who are saying sinaksak daw sila ni ni Mr. Bantag, tapos ang binigyan daw sila ng a certain Zulueta ng tig 50,000 para wag na lang magreklamo. Have you discussed this with your client? Ito yung mga pinakabagong akusasyon sa kanila.
I talked to Colonel Zulueta last Tuesday, Ami, and from that time on, there was no communication except this morning. Only tonight when I was watching your news program, that was the first time that I learned about it, the one about attempt to hurt several inmates by General Bantag. Allegedly, he was drunk, and then later on, a certain Zulueta paid them 50,000 in order to keep silent. Unfortunately, that was not yet present when I talked to Colonel Zulueta last Tuesday. It was only tonight. That was the first time that I heard it.
So kailan po kaya magpapakita, if ever, si Mr. Zulueta? Dahil kahit na po sabihin po niya na wala naman siyang kinalaman dyan, or that hindi naman siya pinadala ng copy ng affidavit, the fact that he's been in the headlines at malaking balita po ito, doesn't he at all feel the need to vindicate himself if indeed he has done nothing wrong? Why is he?
That's the reason that he engaged my services. He said he wants to show that he's not in hiding, he's not dead, and so on. But the reason why he was not seen for the last 2 months, Luchi, is that there was no reason to do so. First, he has not been furnished a copy of the complaint against him. What he received was only a one-page subpena coming from the DOJ. And therefore, as we know, that subpena is useless unless you know what is the reason why you are there. So before you go to the DOJ, you must have a copy of that complaint against you, affidavit of witnesses, so that you can answer that if you go to the DOJ or before the panel prosecutors. Up to the present, he has not been furnished a copy of the complaint against him. That's why I have to request a complete copy of all these documents from the lawyer of General Bantag, because he was my former student, and our law office is just less than 1 kilometer. After that, I confronted Colonel Zulueta, and then I asked him to answer point by point all the allegations involving him so that I can prepare his counter affidavit.
Apa.
But here, since he has not received a formal copy of the affidavit complaint, his 10-day period to file his counter affidavit has not started. That is very simple under the rules, Luchi.
Attorney, one of the things that people want to understand, hindi naman sila, I don't think anybody's surprised that he will deny any involvement here or any knowledge. But even if he was not actively complicit in the scenario being painted here by people who have spoken, people want to understand, dun po sa poder niya, sa posisyon, tsaka sa poder niya inside the Bureau of Corrections, tsaka sa Bilibid. And also, for that matter, his relationship with General Bantag. Doesn't it make it inevitable that he is, at the very least, administratively, operationally responsible for the movement of people inside the Bilibid, and for that matter, supposedly, the movement of people in and out of the Bilibid? Kayo nga po nagsabi, as Ed himself also noted kanina, kayo na nagsabi that between General Bantag and Mr. Zulueta, they can change the security arrangements, they can change the arrangements for the cells, where people go, how to reform it. Isn't he still, at the end of the day, responsible for the movement of people within and then in and out of the Bilibid?
Yes, there is no dispute about that, Roby. But how does it connect about, for example, the killing of Percy Lapid?
Well, ang teorya po na ano at saka ang testament pa ng mga suspect ay may mga tao galing sa loob na ginamit at pinagamit para dito sa pagpatay kay Percy Lapid. Yun po yung connection because eventually people will ask, how is that possible? And how is that possible if officials very high up in the BuCor are not complicit in this operation? Yun po yung koneksyon.
Now, for example, Robbie, the extrajudicial confession of Korea. Take note that in his very first extrajudicial confession, he was talking only to one June Villamor. He never mentioned any official BuCor. Now, and then later on, he executed another extrajudicial confession stating the name of Bantag, for example. But now, he's trying to make use of what was allegedly told him by June Villamor. But at that time, October 22, 2022, June Villamor was already dead. So, that is not allowed under the rules. It's so easy to say that the person who is already dead, this is what he told me. How about if what he will tell now is Korean? Before he died, John Villamor told me that the mastermind, the killing of Percy Lapid is President BBM. So, shall we accept, for example, his statement?
Some people are speculating that he has finally surfaced kasi lumakas yung loob niya dahil nag-file na ng motion to inhibit sa DOJ or inhibit the DOJ yung mga lawyers ng Mabasa family, no? Ano pong komento niyo doon? Kumbaga lumakas ang loob niya na magpakita sa publiko dahil meron ng sagot si General Bantag na official, sabihin na lang natin, there's a legal move. Are you planning to also join him in that inhibition?
Of course, because whatever resolution in the motion for inhibition, Loche, it will affect all the respondents. Why? Because as we said, as they pointed out in their motion for inhibition, there was already evidence of prejudgment on the part of the Secretary of Justice, and still we are hoping that we are entitled to the cold neutrality of an impartial tribunal. But from the very beginning, he was already saying, General Bantag, you have to face the case in court. And at that time, there was no complaint yet filed against them. And the Secretary of Justice was already talking of case in court, you surrender, and so on. So what can we see in those statements of Secretary of Justice? There was already prejudgment. That's why we believe we should be entitled to have our case be decided by an impartial tribunal.
Okay. Atty. Gacayan. Sir, maraming salamat po.
Thank you, sir.
Salamat, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Apo, si Atty. Lauro Gacayan, abogado po ni former BuCor Senior Superintendent Ricardo Zulueta. And we will start up another conversation after this break. Keep it here on One News.
The Communist Party of the Philippines confirms the death of its founder, Jose Sison. Sison passed away on Friday at the age of 83 after 2 weeks of hospital confinement. Sison became founding chairman of CPP in 1968.
The armed forces is not seeing threats from the NPA following the death of CPP founder Jose Sison.
And the Communist Party of the Philippines has declared 10 days of mourning after the death of its founding chairman, Jose Maria Sison.
With the passing of Jose Sison, what happens to the communist movement in the Philippines? Let's talk to two people. Bayan Secretary General Renato Reyes, he joins us via Zoom. And in the studio, Ronald Llamas, former political advisor to the late President Noynoy Aquino. Gentlemen, welcome to the Chiefs and thank you for joining us tonight.
Evening.
Good evening. Magandang gabi sa inyo.
Magandang gabi sa inyo.
Good evening.
Thank you for joining us. Well, Nato, let me start off with you. Death at 83, 3.5 decades in exile. What does this all mean to what is generally called, broadly called, the National Democratic Movement?
Right now, a lot of the groups are mourning. Of course, the CPP has issued its own statement. And those of us in the legal democratic movement are also mourning the loss of Professor Sison, considering his immense contribution to the political life of this country, the mass movement, and the struggle for genuine change. He has affected a lot of people, not just in the Philippines, but also movements abroad who look to him as an inspiration and an ideological guide on how to move forward amid these very turbulent times, and how the people can collectively act. So malaki yung role niya, no, para pagdiktisin ang maraming mga grupo, para pagdiktisin ang iba't ibang mga movements, even abroad. And we feel the great sense of loss with his passing.
But at the same time, I think in the last 2 decades, sinasabi, for example, ng NDF, si Joma was already a consultant lang. He was no longer dealing with the day-to-day organizational affairs. So I'm wondering then kung exactly how big an impact would that have on the movement, considering in a way, I know he's a figurehead, he's a symbol, and he put things in motion at the start. Pero at this particular point, exactly how much does this mean?
Well, his views are quite important even up to now. Different movements look to his writings. If you want to understand what's happening in Philippine society, we look to his statements, we read his books. It's more ideological, political, rather than yung sinasabi ng AFP na organizational or operational control. I think his impact among different generations of activists, his writings, his ideas, the way he looks at things, his analysis, and how these can be applied concretely to what we do on a day-to-day basis. How do we understand the crisis that's happening in the Philippines? How do we understand the rise of the Marcoses? Again, how do we understand the attacks that are being waged on even legal activists right now? So, yun, important yun. Hindi kinakailangan siguro hindi kinakailangan yung organizational aspect or operational control. I think more importantly is what can we learn from his teachings, what can we learn from his analysis and insights into Philippine society and politics.
But Nato, if you allow me, zooming out from the organization and even the larger movement and on the peace process in general, such as it is. Ano yung impact nito sa peace process? And so I ask you, Nato, but I also ask Ronald to weigh in on this question.
Well, una-una, there has to be another round of peace talks. Hindi po pwedeng bitiwan yan. Even with the death of Professor Sison, we believe that the revolution will likely go on because the social basis for waging that revolution remains. So what will the government do? Will it continue to carry out all-out war, or will it sit down and try to understand the roots of the armed conflict and address these? I think it's more worthwhile if the government takes this opportunity to look back on the peace process and the positive role of Professor Sison in those talks. Because every time may impasse, may mga problema, they look to Joma, how to break the impasse, how to move the peace talks forward. And he was always willing to dialogue. He never shut the doors to peace negotiations. So that's something positive. And I think they would probably retain that same attitude, no, na sinimulan ni Professor Sison. So does this mean the end of the armed struggle? I doubt that it would be the end. Does this require a government to look again into the peace negotiations? Definitely. This is a good time to talk peace, no, and try to understand why these problems have persisted, no, over 5 decades.
Pero kung sakasakaling matutuloy yung peace negotiations, ano kaya yung mga non-negotiables on the part of the insurgents kung sakasakali?
Alam niyo po, from where we sit, no self-respecting revolutionary would enter into peace talks with the framework being surrender. No, you enter the peace talks because you want agreements forged on crucial issues. So, dapat open-minded. How can we achieve those agreements? No? Fidel Ramos was open-minded sa ganoon. No? Merong mga paraan para gawin. Pero if the premise is peace talks to force the other side to surrender, that's not going to go very far. So, balikan natin, no? Bakit may peace talks? We want to address the problems, the root causes of the armed struggle. And sana yun ang mangyari. No, hindi yung pupwersahin mo lang yung kabila na sumuko.
Nato, let me bring in Ronald Llamas here. Hey, Ronald, what do you think?
Well, may dalawang forces na magkaiba yung sinasabi. May ibang mga forces na sinasabi, ito na yung katapusan ng communist movement, ng NDF. No? May mga nagsasabi naman na magpapatuloy, na may bagong lakas sa pagkawala ni Joma Sison. No? Perhaps the answer is in between. No? Dahil halimbawa, this year, kung totoo yung balita na namatay yung mag-asawang Chamson, who are effectively the leadership of the Communist Party and the New People's Army, at ngayon yung pagkamatay ni Joma, yung founder at saka main ideologue ng Communist Party of the Philippines, definitely may impact yan. No? Hindi pwedeng sabihin na walang impact. No? Pero at the same time, hindi naman, tingin ko, hindi naman totoo na mawawala yung communist movement at yung National Democratic Movement dahil marami dun sa mga naging dahilan sa pagkakabuo nila ay hindi pa naman nawawala. No? So there might be new leaders, there might be a new ethos sa kilusan, pero hindi naman siya talaga mamamatay. No? It will continue, perhaps in a different form. No? Yun yung kwan. Pero tama yung sabi ni Nato na yung isang role ni Joma ay pag nag-bog down yung peace talks, yung peace process, ay gumagawa siya ng paraan para ma-jumpstart ulit. Actually, yan yung nangyari sa amin ng 2011. Nung nag-stall yung peace process between yung OPAP at saka yung NDF, ay nag-send ng feeler si Joma sa isang high-ranking government official. At pinaabot sa amin ng high-ranking government official yung feelers na yan, pinag-usapan namin sa isang cabinet cluster, at pinapunta ko ni President Noynoy para tignan kung totoo ba itong feelers na ito at saka kung seryoso. Kaya dumiretso ako sa Utrecht with a delegation, kasama ko si Chito Gascon, kasama ko si Attorney Efren Mongkupa, no? At saka si OPAP Commissioner Alex Padilla. At nung nagharap kami sa Utrecht, sabi ko kay Joe, pwede bang tayo muna mag-usap? Wala muna yung delegation mo, wala muna yung delegation ko. Dahil gusto kong mag-heart to heart kung itong pinadala mong feelers ay gaano kaseryoso. At true enough, sabi ni Joe ay, come on Ronald, no? You know that we have to negotiate while we have something to negotiate with. So, dun nagsimula yung aming one-on-one talk. No, at fast forward, pagbalik ko sa Pilipinas, nag-report ako sa presidente, boss, mukhang seryoso yung feelers. No? At after nun, ay nagsimula yung process nung tinatawag naming special track, which is the unofficial peace negotiations. Dahil yung official ay nag-stall. So for 1 year, nagpatuloy yun.
And Ronald, I mean, this reminds that there's a lot of things going on in the background that we don't necessarily know. And we're exploring it through your eyes, through your lens, yung nangyari, and as you appreciate it on their side, di ba?
Yeah.
Sincero ba yung feelers? But of course, you were representing the administration at that time. So mahalaga rin yung position and yung stance ng administrasyon. Ang tanong ko is, we're at the start of the Marcos administration right now. Di ba? So mahalaga rin maintindihan yon, di ba? Not just the role of Joma in the movement, but the role of this new administration. Actually, ang tanong ko nga kanina, do we even know kung ano yung stance ng gobyerno dito? I don't even really completely appreciate or understand if there's even been, a real expression of how this government sees or saw Joma.
Siguro,
Much less this entire movement and what this means for his options, President Marcos's options.
Siguro yun ang isang problema ngayon dahil wala man lang indications kung ano ba yung attitude, yung kondukta ng present government sa usapin ng peace process. No, yun yung hindi pa natin nakikita. Maraming biyahe si President Bongbong, maraming mga statements lalo na sa Maharlika Fund, pero wala man lang ni kaunti o katiting na indication kung ano yung kanyang tingin at posisyon sa peace process. At lalo na yung lumala dahil yung isa sa mga nagja-jumpstart ng peace process pag nag-i-stall si Joma ay nawala na. So, medyo skeptical ako dun sa process ng peace between the government and the CPP dahil sa ganyang klaseng context.
Pero Ronald, the fact also na, super majority sila, no? And over the years, also NATO, no? While we saw the Makabayan bloc and, the CPP and the NDF trying to invade, the mainstream democratic, quote-unquote, government, diba? And for a moment there, your voice was heard quite clearly, but over the years, parang nawala rin yun, no? And now you're left with what? How many in Congress? 6. How do you expect the peace process to move forward from here on? Diba? With such a tiny little voice there, almost just at speak in the context of the whole politics of our nation.
Perhaps, no? 3 seats in Congress, but the whole peace process is not anchored on how many representatives we have in Congress. It's anchored on the reality that there is armed struggle, there's armed conflict still raging in the countryside. What the government has offered so far is localized peace talks, which is practically forcing poor peasants to surrender and pose as NPAs, harap sa mga camera, palalabasing mga NPAs. But that doesn't really win the war, does it? Kasi they're not really winning insofar as fighting the armed groups, no? Such as the NPA. So what would it be for Mr. Marcos? Would he shut the doors to peace, face conflicts on different fronts? Yes, to face the economic crisis. Yung supermajority niya, yes, it may be there, pero there will be cracks along the way. Mag-aaway-aaway din sila. There will be pressure from the US and China. So, saan siya lulugar? Is he prepared to fight all these conflicts on different fronts for the next 6 years? Or will he reconsider, draft a clear policy on how to address the peace negotiations and how to address the insurgency, and then sit down and get to work? Hindi lang pabida, hindi lang pabibo, hindi yung actual work on how to hammer out agreements. Because there were already gains during the previous administration, but it was sabotaged by the militarists. They didn't want it. They wanted the war to go on. What do we do now? We can always go back to those documents that have already been approved, already been signed. Marami nang pinagsimulan eh. Meron na tayong pagtutuntungan sa mga previous na mga usapan. We're not starting from zero. We're not starting from scratch. Tignan natin what we can achieve from that.
Pero off and on na yung localized peace talks na yan. Mukhang parang yun pa rin ang pinapursue ngayon, ano? Dahil yun na nga, nabanggit mo na nga na parang yun ang gusto ng military And it will help kung magre-resume ng full negotiations kung merong taong kausap talaga. Are you seeing anyone now emerging na kapalit kahit inspirational lang si Joma? Talagang malaking role niya dyan sa peace process. Kung sakasakali na i-renew yan, sino kaya yung person now emerging as the one holding together the movement?
Well, the movement, I think, doesn't rely really just on persons or individuals. It doesn't revolve around persons and individuals. But I think there is a competent peace panel. Juliet de Lima Sison is now head of the panel. Louis Herendon is there. Connie Ledesma is there. Stereo Palima is still there. The personalities that have the institutional memory on what went on with the talk since 1992 hanggang sa kasalukuyan, they're still there. Tignan natin, ambangan natin if there will be new members in the panel. But there should always be that opening to talk peace. Hindi dapat saraduhan yan. No? And I think the other side has expressed that it is willing to talk peace even with the Marcos regime, even with the Marcos administration.
Pero Nato, klaro ba sa inyo kung sino yung nananaig doon sa, kaninong boses ang nananaig doon sa gobyerno ngayon? Pagdating sa peace process, kasi for example, parang may ibang boses yung mga general, may ibang boses si VP Sara Duterte, may ibang boses si Clarita Carlos, si BBM, hindi ako sigurado kung anong sinasabi. So, is it forming up already under with one voice, or are you seeing different voices?
Yun nga ang problema eh. Yun ang problema, di ba? There are many voices, but the most important voice should be that of the president. So what is the stand of Mr. Marcos on this issue? We have not heard him make any categorical statement. It has not figured prominently in any of his speeches. Wala yan, hindi yan prominente doon sa nakaraang sona niya, doon sa kanyang inauguration speech. Wala tayong naririnig, no? He mentioned it once siguro during the debates, during the elections. Pero aside from that, wala. Siya yung pinaka-importante eh. Kasi siya yung magsiset ng policy eh. Dapat susundin siya ng AFP. Dapat susundin siya ng DND. Dapat susundin siya ng security sector. Kung ano yung magiging call niya pagdating sa usaping ito. And yet, we have not heard it.
Oh, why do you think that's happening? Why do you think there appears to be silence from Malacanang?
I don't know. Is it because he doesn't understand the gravity of the problem? Is it because of hubris that they have the supermajority? They claim to be have been elected by so many million votes. Baka masyadong bilib din sa sarili, or maybe they're trying to they're underestimating the severity of the crisis. Pero when it comes to that point na matindi na yung crisis at they're being besieged on all fronts ng mga problema, shouldn't they consider opening the doors for serious peace negotiations? Sana dumating siya sa point na maintindihan niya. No? Baka ngayon hindi pa niya naiintindihan yung problema kinakaharap niya.
Well, hopefully, this is not indicative of the attitude of the Marcos government sa peace process. Pero may narinig kasi ako isang general na sabi niya, nagsimula itong insurgency ng Communist Party of the Philippines, ng NPA, nung panahon ng tatay. At sa ngayon, sa panahon ng anak, ay tatapusin namin ito. Hopefully, hindi yun yung indicative sa magiging attitude ng gobyerno. Pero gusto kong balikan lang yung naging process namin ni Joma. Nagulat ako na very reasonable yung naging resulta nung special track namin na nagtapos nung December 18, 2011. Dahil pumayag si Joma sa mga best effort na nakapaloob doon sa political settlement na pinagkasunduan namin na pinesenta sa presidente at inaprubahan ng presidente. Pero pagbalik namin ng February with Pablito Sanidad, Dodong Nemenso, etc., ay sinabi ni Fidel Alcavili at saka ni Louis Halandoni na nagbago yung aming isip. Ang presumption ko ay hindi tinanggap yung inaprubahan ni Joe dito sa Pilipinas. No? Pero during that negotiation, ay very optimistic ako na nagsimula na very skeptical dahil pumayag siya sa mga agreements na hindi earth-shaking. Sabi ko nga kay Joe noon, Joe, hindi pwedeng yung hihingiin mo sa amin are the conditions for victory. Ang pwede namin ibigay ay yung conditions for a political settlement na hindi kayo ikukulong, hindi kayo tutiligsain pagpasok nyo sa political mainstream. Pumayag siya, no? At that point.
But I'll get back to that point. Na, ang isang problema ngayon is we don't even have that much to read into. Diba? Diba? Parang, even with the death, I'm trying to scour the internet for, what is the official message from Malacanang? I think I saw Vice President Sara Duterte basically at most saying, may God have mercy on his soul. Diba? We've seen the extreme messaging from NTF-ELCAC and so on. But in the absence of that...
Well, the Defense Secretary
diba?
has said that the biggest stumbling block to peace has been removed. So medyo ganon, no? Very strong statements.
Although yung Armed Forces of the Philippines, yung statement nila mas decente, no? Respecting the dead. No? Yun yung kanilang statement. So parang walang coordination yung DND at saka yung AFP. At least on the statement.
Pero yun nga, sa military, while we don't have much to read into sa Malacanang, I'm not an expert on this, but when I talk to military people, ang what I keep hearing is, localized peace process naman ang hinahabol namin. That's working for us, localized yung peace process. And then at most, you saw some military leaders saying that maybe this gives the leadership of the communist movement an opportunity to reconsider their engagement with us. So in other words, if I'm reading that right, okay naman kami. We'll continue the peace process below at the community level, and then actually yung sa hindi na namin inaano yan, hindi na hinahabol.
Ang peace process kasi two-way. Ang sinasabi nga nila NATO, ang localized peace talks is basically an offer to the CPP-NPA to surrender. So medyo hindi siya two-way. No, one-way lang yon. So it's not really a peace process.
Okay.
Yeah, tapos yung problema nga natin, in the absence of any clear statement from the President or any policy directive, what will prevail would be the old policy. So what was being implemented during the time of Duterte will simply be continued. Kasi wala namang signal na, baguhin nyo na yan, stop killing people, respect IHL, stop forcing the farmers to surrender and pose as NPAs, unless there's a clear message from the leadership that these things are wrong and unacceptable, magtutuloy-tuloy lang. So don't expect any radical policy shift unless there's something clear from the President.
Okay. Well, we've run out of time. Actually, overtime na tayo. So in the meantime, Renato Reyes and Ronald Llamas, sir, maraming salamat sa inyong dalawa.
Salamat din.
Salamat.
Thank you.
Salamat.
Thank you po. Magandang gabi. Good evening.
And that is it for the Chiefs. We hope it was discussed. We'll keep the conversation going. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.
I'm Mami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5.
I'm Ed Lingao. We are One News, all sides, all the time.